Well, that's wrong. It's supposed to be say 25 up there. It said 24. I changed that. Oh well. I can fix it in post. Uh, how's it going, sir? Good to have you back.
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we've how's your week been? We got a heat wave where I am. I know you're further south. Heat's normal for you.
Yep, it's pretty much 95 plus every single day, about 70 some percent humidity, so it's just wonderful.
You know what? That does sound actually pretty wonderful for me. The highest we got up here was like 77 Fahrenheit, which is
Oh,
comfortable, but I do want some heat. I think I'm overdue for it as a Canadian.
now that we're in the full swing of summer, you want those nice hot days at least.
Yeah, we're in second day of summer, fine, officially, at least according to the
Yep.
calendar, right? Um, yeah, so that's all good. Guys in the chat, let us know if our audio levels, like we did our test, we're balanced on our end, but if we're coming a little low on your side, please just crank us up a little bit because we're not going to get much louder. I don't think there's going to be any shouting or screaming in this one because it's not that type of script. But yeah, happy to have you back. Um, so yeah, let's get in with it since it seems everything is all 5 by 5. According to that, according to the chat right now. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Raul, back again for, I think, fourth time?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Uh, yeah, I'm happy to have you back. We've got a fun one today. This week, we're back in like the top 10 of scripts from the 2023 blacklist. This one is called Stakehorse. It's written by Justin Piasecki. Raul, please share with the audience the log line to this week's script.
Sure thing. So, a racetrack veterinarian who runs an off the books ER for criminals finds his practice and life in jeopardy when he's recruited for his patient's heist.
That's right. The synopsis is Nick Easter is an experienced horse veterinarian who moonlights as a medic for a small criminal ring operated by his father-in-law, Carl. Nick wants out, and Carl plans a big operation to grant him that freedom just in time for Nick's son, Sean, to be released from juvenile hall. But when a phase of the big score goes wrong, Nick finds himself in a tight position with a new head of the gang blackmailing his son in order to get Nick's help in pulling off what could be the greatest robbery of a horse track ever. Uh, yeah, this is. I was reading this and I'm thinking this is kind of like it's the old veterinarian trope that we've seen in a lot of procedurals and stuff, where the vet used to be a licensed physician, lost his license due to malpractice, became a vet, and then moonlights on the side, providing medical aid to criminals off the books, so to speak. But this one kind of has a little bit of like an Ocean's 11 twist to it with some of these elaborate heists and the amount of money they're investing into these scores. Um, Raul, what was your thoughts when you're reading this script this week?
Yeah, I like it. I like the combination of the vet stuff. They seem to have the writer had a clever explanation for what he was doing and how he was kind of trying to hide what he was doing as well. So I like that. And I think adding, like you said, I think adding the heist element into it made it a really nice read actually. I don't think I was ever bored throughout the script. It kind of kept pace and kept going, and
Mm-hmm.
just when you thought it was winding down, they would introduce a new element of now they're going to go after this target or something else happens. So I think it was a good way to kind of lead through the story at least.
It really was. I mean, I was kind of surprised that it started with a voiceover talking about the advantages of what a thoroughbred horse can do, like the 200 times a minute its heart beats, blood types, multiple pulmonary arteries that pump like too much, way more blood through the human heart. But the one thing it has in common with man is that it only takes 6 minutes or less to bleed out, just like with us. And I thought that's kind of fascinating. And then I'm thinking to myself as I'm reading the script, okay, is that going to pay off? Is that information really informative? And I'm sorry to disappoint. It doesn't really come back in the same. It's just kind of there to show that this guy's knowledgeable about his field, which I don't mind.
Yeah, it's sort of like in a like almost like in a roundabout way. It kind of comes back with a little going a little bit further into the script, just for this little bit of information as far as like when one of them dies, possibly the horse gets released or whatever, and they're sort of naming the horses after these people so that they have something to kind of hide the books, like
Right.
cook the books or whatever on his end. And report, because at one point he even says like I can report this medication on a tax return or whatever. But yeah, in terms of there being a real other connection that comes back in terms of with the horses and stuff, not really. So it was kind of a we could have kind of skipped that
Just kind
voiceover,
of
I
a
guess.
factoid. I think this was done by the writer to try and convey that he did the research with regards to the subject matter he's writing about, which I kind of appreciated. That yeah, he made it feel authentic. Because we get this voiceover as we're seeing essentially one of the earlier phases of this big heist, which is basically a drug robbery from one team to another. So one organization is moving drugs. I think they're Chechen, if memory serves, and this other one is coming here and it's just basically stealing them during a thunderstorm. And they pretty much wipe out the Chechens, but a couple of their guys gets injured. But the team is efficient enough that they leave no trace behind aside from a little bit of blood. And then we discovered that there is this underground hospital beneath a horse ranch that's operated by our main character Nick Easter, who is a veterinarian, specifically for horses. And there's this interesting aspect that I thought was really cool is that underneath the gums of these two crooks is a 4-digit code that identifies them with a horse that also has a 4-digit code tattooed on their gums. And this is their code used to they like Nick doesn't know their real names or any of their identities. He just knows them by their related horse. They're each person is paired with a horse that he is in charge of taking care of. And so you have like 3232 and 1714, and these are the two guys, and one's named Prospector and the other one's like was it young lady diver or young lady something of that nature. Like there are at least 24 characters in this screenplay, like named characters. There's a lot to keep track of, guys. So it's so I apologize for getting some things wrong. But it's really interesting because all the medication that they use in order to stabilize these guys, they can record and pair with the horses to avoid any sort of suspicion of what's going on. And
Yeah, one of them, if one of them happens to die or whatever, they or even like at the beginning we find out one of them was injured in the heist that you were talking about. That kind of opens up the script. He
mhm,
then has this I guess incinerator on his ranch that I think it's sort of implied. I'm not sure if you got the same thing that he sort of one of the horses like dies in order to so he can officially put it on his books that he kind of had the um because he used all this medicine and stuff like that, he was basically trying to save this horse and it didn't make it. So
mhm.
the horse ends up going along with the criminals, I guess, that are in the gang if they happen to get hurt or require too much medication or whatever. Is that what you got out of it too?
I got two options out of it because of what happens later. So the first one is that I felt okay, so we know he's got an on-site crematorium that he's used for destroyed animals, and I'm wondering, okay, is if the crook is killed in action, and he has to burn the body. Does he do that to the horse? But I suspect what ends up doing is what we see later is he just takes the horse out to this protected area and then lets it roam free without any other tags other than the tattoo on its gums, which if you shouldn't actually be able to find or locate in there because it's a big wildlife preserve for horses and you're not supposed to really be on that property to hunt or take anything. So
Yeah, so it could be the criminal's body, I guess, going into the incinerator so he
right.
can get rid of all traces, and then that horse preserve he kind of lets him go on the ranch.
Yeah, so if the horse doesn't need to be destroyed, it goes to this preserve that they've dropped off, and they drop off we see them drop off at least 2 horses, and by the time we get to that, we kind of realize I think this is what he's been doing the entire time. If the horse is actually okay, but its partner in crime, so to speak, is not. This is just a more humane thing to do, because we do learn that Nick actually cares for these animals and he's very knowledgeable about them. And he actually saves a horse from another doctor who misdiagnoses its injury. He thinks it's a severe head injury, but it's actually just a mild concussion, and the horse would recover fully without any issues. So we get that little back and forth to see how much he cares. And we also get peppered out that his 17-year-old son, Sean, is in juvenile hall for essentially like stealing basically the drugs from his dad's practice, and using them. And it's part of like a rehabilitation program. And if he passes in the next 30 days or so, he's released on his own recognizance, and probably with parole check-ins and whatnot for a couple of years afterwards. But if he ends up using again, he's going to serve out another 7 years in a proper jail, and not in a juvenile hall. So we've got this type of conflict here. There's lots of information. We learn a lot about Nick's life, but not so much really about him as a character for the first half of the script. We know he doesn't have a wife, and we later find out, well, she died. We don't know how she died or the circumstances around that. And we also learn that when Sean was, I guess, a year younger or so, he, trying to impress some college kids at a frat house, stole some medications from his office, and OD'd and nearly died on the grounds. And that's how he got into that situation. And then we have Carl Reinhardt, who's his father-in-law, who's like in his 70s. He's an old school type, like, he's a mobster, but it's not of a huge operation, which I thought was kind of fascinating, because usually you get, like, in these types of movies, or types of stories, you get guys with like this huge like cabal of men at his disposal to do all these gigs. And we find out that he's like running a very small but very lucrative operation. So what were your thoughts on like Carl and his introduction, and what we got to learn about him and Nick's relationship?
I liked it for several reasons. And going back to what you were saying about Nick too, that we don't find out too much about him. I kind of liked how they handled the writer, how he handles the characters in this, because you don't find out too much. You're right, but it's just enough to keep you interested, just enough to give him some backstory, just enough to um, humanize him a little bit. You find out that he has this, similar story. It's kind of to what happened with his son, right? So it's almost like history repeating itself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you find out through little glimpses with his son that he sort of doesn't know how to handle the situation, and he's sort of a helpless dad, sort of doesn't know how to be there emotionally for him, at least with the whenever you find him at juvie, sort of checking in on him.
Right.
And you're right, even with Carl too, you find out just enough to keep the story going. And I kind of like that, instead of taking too much time with huge backstories or getting too nitty gritty into their lives. It's sort of just enough to serve the plot, and then the writer just keeps going with it. So I liked it. I don't know what you thought about it.
I thought it was a good way to kind of keep things moving and on pace, because these types of stories, especially when you take a look at other crime, like The Italian Job, Ocean's 11, what's the other one with Jeremy Renner and Ben Affleck that came out like a decade ago? That was The Town. Was it The Town? Yeah, maybe The Town. Something like that. They do kind of stop the story to delve into the character's past a little bit in some regard. And I like the fact that when we don't really get a stopping of the story, we get something that's a bit more organic. There's only really like one flashback of this, and it is focused on the event that Nick experienced with Sean overdosing. But we also have like an interwoven side story with 2 investigators. The first one is Detective Jim Piasecki, who's the mid-30s guy, and then Detective Cook, who's the dude in the 60s who's kind of like broaching retirement. And they're following up on basically the raid on the Chechens and whatever merchandise was stolen from them. and they're trying to figure out what's going on here, and they're paying attention to the hospitals because no one's reported in anything, and so they're really trying to, uh, you know, get a beat on this case. What was going on? What gangs are involved? If they're gangs or if it's organized crime, who is it going to be? We then get introduced to another character named Yang, who's the forensic tech, who basically says, "Yeah, we found some weird supplements in here that are for animals." Like not it's mixed in with some of the blood, and it's really weird that you shouldn't really be seeing this. And so that starts Pulaski on the investigation to start looking at every outside normal medical institution. So, you know, veterinary hospitals and ranches that have their own little small medical facility for the livestock, all that stuff. He starts getting everything out in the area of because this takes place in Illinois, if I'm correct. So he's doing everything out in that region, trying to find, searching everywhere where these guys could be, and
And it's like peppered a little bit in there throughout the story that you're right with the forensic that comes in and he's like, well, this is like large feed stock or supplies or whatever that we found with this. So it sort of sets him down that path, but he doesn't get too close, I guess, in terms of the investigation. They're sort of, it's almost like they're leading to something. You almost think that they're kind of sort of getting on their trail. But
yeah.
it's peppered in enough at the beginning of the story to kind of cause a little bit of intrigue at least.
It is. Part of it feels organic, but at the same time, it also feels a little off because the whole idea of a veterinarian moonlighting to treat criminals is it's cliche, but the thing is, it's actually pursued as an option. If there's no one's checking into the hospitals, the first thing they go to is the vets. They're like, and not necessarily to accuse the vets of anything, but just see, hey, are you missing medical supplies? Did you ever break in? Did someone steal gauze and stitch suture and pills, pain pills for dogs or cats or what have you, or any antiseptics, anything like that. It's something I've
They're enough
encountered.
off the radar, I guess, off the beaten path anyway, but
Yeah,
they still have medical supplies enough to patch someone up, I guess.
yeah. I mean, because the other part too is like you also check. Okay, let's look at pharmacies. Like have they been hit with somebody recently within the time, or were they hit within months ago, so that someone has a stockpile? And if that's the case, let's go take a look to see what was stolen, or were there any gross purchases of medical supplies by someone that was not a licensed physician or nurse or paramedic or anything of that nature. It could, where are those crazies? Where are those crazies that are doing those extreme stuff? And I was like, okay, so they're not jumping the gun to that, which I think is fair. But when they get that one clue of like animal livestock, supplements, it's like, well, that should cue you in to go to the dog clinic or something and right away. Let's just follow that.
Yeah, he gets at one point he starts printing out all those papers with I guess we find out later that they're vet clinics, and he starts kind of checking around.
Yeah, we find out he's been checking off a lot of them over the last several days, to the point where there's even like another heist that they do, where we find out that they didn't actually steal anything; they just planted something. And I thought that was really clever because it was a bank job, but it wasn't a whole lot of money. So they planted something in with the money, so that wherever it goes, they could use it to their advantage to take more money. And I'm like, that's a really cool setup. I like that. That's you don't get that level of forward thinking in current day scripts these days, where they're like planning ahead. And what's funny is I like how the relationship has Nick so far divorced from all of this at his own request, so that he doesn't know, so he can't really be culpable or interrogated and provide any useful information in the event that this whole thing blows up in their faces. He's got a lot of plausible deniability because Carl has basically said that, yeah, Nick is off limits to him and his crew. All he knows is your code names for your medical treatment, and that's it. But Carl gets this really big job from a third party that does let him in on something amazing. And in order for them to pull it off, they need some of Nick's expertise as a veterinarian to do something really cool, which is they've managed to get this old armored truck. And the whole idea is they're going to turn it into a horse carriage, like a horse trailer, because they want to. That's part of their gimmick. And Nick says, "Well, you don't really want to use a horse trailer. You probably because it's too conspicuous. It's too conspicuous. But if you convert it to an ambulance, a horse ambulance, that would get you past a lot of other hurdles." And I liked that scene. What was your thoughts about this whole setup here and the dynamic between Carl and Nick when he's proposing this type of new gimmick?
I thought it was great because it brings in different parts of the character that we've already learned. So it brings in the fact that not only is he a veterinarian, but I think earlier in the script we found out that he has a job at the racetrack where he takes care of these horses legitimately. It's just part of his job and his practice. He kind of gets called down to the track, so it pulls that aspect in, and then it shows that he has sort of insider knowledge as far as how the track works. So he's also quite a smart character as well. And going back a little bit too to their dynamic between is Carl, right?
Yeah,
Is his father-in-law.
right.
His the I like the dynamic between them because he wrote them as sort of Nick wants to get out at this point. He keeps the information that he knows about everybody limited, like you said, in order to, if he does get caught or something does go down, he can deny all of it. And at some point in the script, I think about midway after, right as they're setting this up with the ambulance, we get a scene. Was it at the diner? I think where Carl's like, "I want to be doing this." Essentially, like he
Mm-hmm.
can get out, and he's looking at this job as an opportunity. This job that he gets from the third party that you mentioned, but he sort of goes, I want to be in this. I'm actually, this is fun for me, I guess, to some extent for him, or he, or maybe it's all he knows, but he likes it. And Nick on the opposite end is like, I have other things to pay attention to. I guess he doesn't want to see his son potentially go down and make some of the same mistakes that he made. So he's like, I want out.
Right.
And I like the dynamic between them.
Me too. And it also raises a question because I was trying to wrap my head around, aside from the family connection with Nick and his father-in-law, why is he doing this? Like, what is he really getting out of it? And I really couldn't identify that aspect of it. It's
On
not
Carl's side or Nick's side?
on Nick's side because Carl, I understood what he's getting out of. His son-in-law is a doctor and a very good one, is able to keep his boys alive without cops finding out. But Nick, it's like I don't get the sense that he's really satisfied doing this. It feels like a burden for him. And
Yeah,
I was hoping we'd
he
get
sort
an
of
explanation
thinly
around
veiled it,
that.
didn't he? In the story of uh, it's implying almost that that part was a little weird to me because it almost implied like Carl had something over his head.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what I mean. It was kind of thinly veiled because it seems like it was almost operating under the fact like you owe me a favor because I got you out of something. And I think that had something to do tied in with him losing his license and getting in trouble before or whatever. And it seems to indicate that Carl saved him from something, and now he kind of owes him one, so he does this stuff, but he doesn't want to get too involved. Um, but yeah, I guess with like you, I kind of wish I would have gotten to know a little bit more about that, and I kind of wish they would have delved a little bit deeper into. I guess it would make their relationship kind of weird if Carl had something big over his head, but he sort of just seems to like him. He sort of seems to like him and want to take him under his wing, and that's sort of why he protects him throughout this heist and stuff. So, yeah, I don't. I guess the part of why Nick is involved is left a little bit of a mystery anyway.
Yeah, because it's basically like the character motivation. What is Nick getting out of this? And he's not held hostage in any way. There's no real threats on his life for it. And we also learn later on that he actually switched to majors in medical school. So he's 2 years into being a doctor for humans, and then he switches to animals. Just
Right.
suddenly, and his excuse is that he's not much of a people person. He thinks the patients are better. Um, but so I'm like thinking, okay, well, where's like where's the conflict and the motivation? Because he has this big property, he's got his own private ranch, he's doing well financially. The only thing that is, eating away at him is that his kids, in rehab, juvenile hall rehab, and he's obviously misses him but doesn't know how to communicate all the feelings he wants to for him. Carl's his father-in-law, so Carl's got an invested interest in Sean, his son, getting out clean as well. So there's that. They're in sync there. But it just kind of feels like maybe this is something he got wrapped into because he fell in love with Carl's daughter. I don't know how they met, but they met. They got married. They had Sean, and something happened. I'm guessing, which is a story I would have loved to have seen a little bit in this part, where something happened where Carl just needed help, and you know Nick helped him, saved his life. Did it for his wife, did it for his kid, and that just kind of opened up this new world where maybe I just wanted to pepper, like, give me some sort of, like, what's the opportunity that Nick gets that makes us understand and believe that he would be continually doing this at least for 17 years.
Yeah, because they go into his. Yeah, you're right. They do kind of go into the fact that Carl helped him out and stuff like that, but I don't think that's enough of a reason because You're right. Throughout the script, Nick, uh, even before the halfway point, right? I mean, he's basically like, I want out. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to know anything about this. I want out. I'm not interested in doing this anymore. Um, but yet he keeps going for some reason. And then Carl's sort of persuasive argument to him is, well, we got this thing. It could be the last thing. And then, I want to see you get out of this as well. Have Sean have somebody to return home to and do this one last thing with me, and we're kind of done. Um, but yeah, I mean, I, I, it, I'm trying. I'm almost trying to like brainstorm. I'm like, well, kind of set up sort of an antagonistic relationship, but maybe if Carl holds something over him, like something went wrong in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
Carl sort of bailed him out, and now he owes him, sort of, that type of thing. Because obviously Carl has these resources from doing these heists and whatever that maybe. Or maybe if like Nick was down on his luck or something, just kind of spitballing ideas that like Carl had some money and bailed him out, or propped up his practice or something. And he's like, hey, just do this for me and I won't involve you too much or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess it would have given him some reason to keep coming back to it, I suppose, instead of kind of what you read from the script is he wants out. Why didn't he just get out? I guess.
Yeah, like it's I mean, the writer is asking a lot of us to empathize with the family dynamic to keep them together, but I don't think that's strong enough in this case. But I do like the fact that Carl, who's established as like he's in his 70s, he's wanting to retire too. That's why he's doing this gig. Like we learned that they traded in like four other smaller opportunity jobs that they would have normally done anyways for this big one because it's supposed to be the end game. And it's not just for Carl, but it's for his crew of five plus Nick. As well. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like they all want out to some degree. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. But I still need to know, like, how did Nick, what tantalized Nick to get him in the first place? That's not just, oh, I'm helping out my father-in-law. It just felt a little weak to me. But the thing is, the script doesn't let you dwell on that too quickly because it gets right into the next big operation, which is not only are they building this ambulance, but they're kind of outfitting this other vehicle with railroad wheels because they've got another heist involved, which I thought was pretty cool. It's they're doing more into this as well. This is the one where I mentioned earlier where they leave something in as opposed to taking something out, and it's really well planned because they're basically, everybody's assuming they're going to be using the roads, and they know the route of this one truck, and they're going to hit it, and it's going to be their big score, or at least it's their next step in their big score. And because one of the two guys from the first operation doesn't make it, and Prospector is out of commission, they need another hand, and Carl is going to step in for one of them, and he wants Nick to do the other, but Nick will not get involved. He actually puts his foot down and he says, find someone else. and we find out that Nick's nurse, who wants a promotion, named Sandra, steps up to volunteer. And as I mentioned earlier, again, there's like 24 characters in this. It's a lot. There some have details, some have none, but they keep coming back. So we are going to do our best to try and remember those names as they come in. But Sandra is now doing the Nick role, which is she's just in she's in this truck that's on the track rail on the rail tracks, and they're taking advantage of a train that's going to be slowing down traffic at this one section outside of the main city. And the idea is that they're going to use their vehicle to block that off so that they can tag this truck. And everything kind of goes really smoothly at first. Like even the cops are freaked out because they can't get there because it's not a normal road heist. It's in between this intersection, and there's so many cars everywhere already because of the time of day. And there's no exit.
And they were using the railway stop, right, as sort of to block up traffic even more.
Exactly. So like they couldn't even go through it at all, and it's really clever because they can get away by rail, which. Yeah, you can follow the rail kind of with your car, but not very well or effectively or even safely to a point. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. And this is where we get to like our mid-act climax where Cook and Jim Piasecki, those two detectives mentioned earlier, get called in to help because they figure out there's a connection with the guns that are being used, because apparently there's a modification that was discarded in the first heist that kind of ramps up the velocity of the rounds, I think, or something to that nature. And it's during the reports that's happening at this rail track stop, someone says, yeah, this is where it's here, and this is why this district is being brought in to assist with the local precinct in that area as well, because it's connected to the case. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. It's kind of a stretch, but I guess it works, and it helps with these guys get motivated. And when they can't get there by car, they literally get out and then run on foot to go to the scene of the crime. And we get a couple of gun talk points throughout this script, which some are fairly accurate, others not so much. One of the things the writer does, a lot of Hollywood writers make this mistake. They think the AR in an AR-15 stands for automatic rifle, but it's not. It's actually the initials of the brand that makes the rifle, called Armalite. And it's a semi-automatic, so it's not even an automatic rifle. So there's also that, and well, that kind of bothered me. I'm not a huge gun advocate or not. I believe in self-defense, of course, but it's like I also think if you're going to be writing about guns in your script, understand exactly what they are, how they function, do the research. It's never a bad move to know what you're talking about. He did it for the horses. I mean, I felt sold that he knew how to diagnose and treat horses, but the moment he went into the armaments section of things, I was like, oh, okay, he decided to just peruse.
Yeah, especially since it sort of ties into the story. Like that's how they hook him back in, because they're talking about the gun mods and everything else.
Right.
The police precinct anyway. So yeah, since it's directly involved with the story.
Yeah, I was hoping to have a better connection, because later on they get into something with this high velocity beanbags shotgun sniper rifle hybrid thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, at 90 feet it slows down and it's going to be harmless, and then it blows a hole in a piece of wood, and they're like, no, we better go back a lot further because it's actually going to really do some significant damage. But we get into this thing where, so Carl is kind of leading the way, and I like the fact that these guys are doing it without trying to harm anybody. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, they don't shoot up the guards that are transporting the money. They use a paintball gun to shade out the windshield in the windows, and they just say, like, stay in the car, don't move, don't do anything, we don't want to hurt you. And then a good Samaritan comes out, draws a gun, and they don't shoot him back. They're just like, yeah, okay, we'll cooperate. And luckily one of the other crew grabs the paintball gun and hits the Good Samaritan with that, so that they get the upper hand and they can just, knock that guy out, leave him aside safely, and then finish off their job. But as they're doing this, Detective Cook shows up, and he's not being cautious at all. He's basically just opening fire right out on them, and I don't even think he identified himself as a police officer either.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there was any dialogue from him. I think it's just like reading the script, just gunshots are heard, and I think one of the guys ends up getting hit too. One of the people that are along for the heist,
Yeah,
anyway.
one of the crew and Carl gets hit, but Carl also takes out Cook, shoots him in the neck, and Pulaski comes there right at the end and to help his fallen partner. And
I like that part because, like you said, it was clever with the how they were trying to get there, and there was a little bit of tension build up anyway with the get the helicopter out here, and the helicopter was waiting for clearance, and then at some point the cops just decided, screw it, let's take off on foot. So they I think it was Cook first, like opened his door and just
mhm.
started booking it, and then Pulaski after him until. Right when they get to that point, they're I think weren't they like running down the railroad tracks or something to try to get to them?
I think they were about to pursue on the railroad tracks, but they're running up the highway towards the
Right.
railroad tracks from the city. So who knows how many miles that was? Because I liked how they described it. How Cook comes in, he's like drenched in sweat, he's wheezing, he can barely hold his gun straight, but he's still shooting at the guys. And I'm like, okay, that's commitment. I dig that. That could be fun for an actor to do. And then
Yeah.
Pulaski comes up, and he's kind of in the same condition as well, because who knows how long they've been running for. Um, but we get this intense scene, like a character of Carl, who's 70s. He's got a gunshot wound. Um, Nobody knows exactly what to do. Chandra is a little bit outside of her uh, field at this point. She's able to stabilize the other guy. She's doing chest compressions on Carl. They managed to get what they needed to and take off. And they immediately call Nick. And when Nick finds out that Sandra administered a medication that actually could do more harm than good to Carl, and it really like, yeah, we get into this really dour scene where you don't know what's going to happen to Carl, and sadly we learn that he passes away from this, and Sandra is fired because of that, and so she's out of a job. His father-in-law is dead, and this is where we learn about the horse preserve, this isolated area for wild horses, and the Carl's companion horse is taken, out there and released into the wild. And that's where I realized, oh, okay, maybe the first guy that died, that's what they did with that guy's horse, so nobody can find out. And I'm like, it's kind of, I liked how it's essentially putting him out to pasture, but not as a euphemism for something. I mean, it's a
Right.
literally just, yeah, there he goes, you're free, you're
They're
no.
literally putting the horse out there
Mm-hmm.
and kind of letting it go. I liked it. It almost feels like a cathartic moment as well for because Carl and Nick sort of had this. They were close, but it almost feels like two guys that don't know how to talk to each other very well. They don't know how to express their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of get the sense that Carl cares for Nick, and Nick appreciates the help or appreciates the help that he got in the past from him. So yeah, it was a nice moment in the script, albeit sad, but because Carl is gets caught up in the middle of this, and it was when at a time when Nick said, "I'm out. I don't want to do
Right.
this anymore."
And then I really thought it was quite effective how just with visuals, no dialogue, Nick tells Sean that his grandfather's dead, and Sean is just like buries his head in his chest, crying because they went to hockey games together, and they did stuff. They were an actual family. They weren't just a crime family. And Sean
Right, there's
doesn't
more to
know,
them
but
than just the heist that they do, right? The operation that they run. And
yeah.
I will say too that now that you bring that up too, the one thing about this script throughout was I loved the dialogue. It was very well done in my opinion. Um, Nothing's explicitly spelled out. They don't have unnecessary dialogue. Actually, in most of the scenes, I feel like the dialogue uh isn't even plot related. They're just you just feel like it's characters talking,
Hmm.
like real talking in real life, and I thought it was very well done. I don't know what you thought about that, but even at the beginning, sort of when you get the relationship between Carl and Nick, it was, they're sitting at the diner, they almost don't know how to talk to each other, and they just exchange these small pleasantries almost until it's time to talk about the heist or whatever, which is when they kind of get into it. But
Yeah.
I thought it was very well done.
No, what I liked about it is that each character's voice, even when they're on the page just for a moment, it felt distinct. It's not like I was reading one voice with different character names above all the dialogue. It's like, okay, yeah, Nick has this certain way of talking. He's a bit more technical. Carl is a bit more rough around the edges with how he's doing stuff. He has more sentence fragments. Even some of the other characters, like Jim Pulaski, is more methodical. Cook is a bit old school and grudgy. So there's a parallel there. Sandra, Hispanic, but she doesn't say much, so there's nothing like there. Sean, he doesn't say much either. So, but I bet what he does say is he's more of a receptive character, right? Like he's the typical teenager. Okay, I'm listening to Dad. This is what he says. Okay, yes, sir. What have you? All the other ones, like there's what is it? There's a Dr. Anderson who works at the racetrack. She's like the senior vet there, and we find out from her that they don't want Nick to come back next season, so he's like put on like a reserve or an alternate, and it really has nothing to do with his qualifications. It has to do with the past, and it seems to be related more to the fact that he did secure his medication properly, which compromised his son. Like it feels like it's a political optics thing. I wish there's a
Yeah,
bit.
it almost feels like insider, like some whatever's going on at the track anyway.
Yeah, it feels that plot point felt a little inauthentic to me because it's a personal matter. The only one who's been harmed by it is himself and Sean, and it's basically
Right.
through it's basically under the dangerous aspect of kids will be kids, right? When a kid breaks into something that they're not supposed to, and it's a proper break-in. It's like it's not like to say he laxed on the security to his medication. He actually had it pretty well secured. There took some effort for Sean to break into the to this to get these pills or whatever. So he's already living with the embarrassment and a punishment that's far more cruel. There's since his track record as a physician, as a veterinarian, is immaculate to as far as we can tell. It seems no reason like who would actually care if a guy who owns horses who clearly has several millions of dollars because you need to in order to own horses for racetracks and stuff. It's like, oh, the doctor that saved my horse's life that allowed him to race again and make me more money. So his kid was a junkie and he's getting rehab. I don't care. He's saving me millions of dollars on a horse. I don't have to take him out. I don't have to turn him into glue. I don't have to. He's alive enough for me to breed him to get more horses. Like they don't care about that. The optics are non-existent as far as I would understand it to be. Like, what were your
Yeah, I don't.
thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I could, to be honest with you, in this whole script, I could do without the racetrack vet scenes. Well, Sandra anyway, as far as that's concerned, it
Right.
did seem like she was getting at something political, but then again, you also have betting and all these things, and these people that own horses really just care about their horses. What are they going to care about some vet or what they do in their personal life? So yeah, that part. Honestly, it could have done without, and I think it could have cut some of the script down a little bit as well, which I think would have helped.
Yeah, in fact, you make a very good point. This is 117 pages of a script. There are, I would say, a handful of things that could have been completely discarded that were not required for the flow of the plot or the characters at all. Some of it was more like trying to be technically impressive with the way things are staged and planned. Um, I do like the twist because it's not. I mean, it's kind of set up, but it's not exactly a twist, and it's not really a spoiler because a spoiler is like the last 40 pages of this script, but you can't get into it without actually conveying a little bit of what the twist is, which is that we find out that Jim Pulaski is the partner that Carl teamed up with for this big heist. And the heist is they're going to steal around $30 million from the racetrack that Nick works at or did work at. And how they pull that off, we can't get into the two details, but it does involve the horse ambulance and a lot of really meticulous planning, which is laid out well in the climax. But again, it's a 40-page climax. I think that's a little much for this type of story because it kind of feels like it changes tone and gears, where the other stuff is kind of like straightforward robberies, no real disguises, no real magic trying to going on here. It's very straightforward, to the point. kind of like a smash and grab, so to speak. And now we're getting to something where, okay, we're trying to be very discreet. We're trying to make sure we get as far away from this without anyone knowing what's happening beforehand. And it does switch into like an Ocean's 11 style plot or Now You See Me thing.
Yeah, after the Pulaski thing was revealed in the script, that it sort of changed tone a little bit, and we sort of got into this more meticulous heist planning thing. Um, I thought it was nice how they brought the cops into it because before that, you kind of get this sense that the police investigation is sort of taking place alongside this, and you're almost thinking, oh, maybe Nick is going to get caught before he gets out, type of thing.
mm-hmm.
For the writer to just go, no, actually, now this is the guy that's behind all of this, and this is why you're getting pulled back into it. So it was a nice way to bring that in. But it did change a little bit. It kind of, we get a little bit of a different tone in the last 40, 50 pages, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of shifts the movie away from being about, oh, this is how the guy operates his underground hospital for criminals, to, all right, now he's part of this Ocean's 11's plan. And I'm like, okay, I feel like it's two different movies now. Because
Yeah, 'cause the rest of the first part of the movie was grounded by the fact that he had his son. He kind of wanted to get out. You kind of get the impression that he was trying to get on the straight and narrow again, and Carl was going to help him do it and just sort of say, retire his son-in-law and just say, go and do whatever you want and raise horses on a ranch or whatever. And then this last part of the script uh, didn't feel as grounded. It was almost sort of like, let's shift gears into the um, set, whatever you want to call it, set piece,
mhm,
action piece, whatever part of the script that's necessary to sort of, I don't know, ramp up some action at the end or whatever. So it did feel like it switched gears pretty hard at the end there.
it did, because there was not really much of a setup here. We only get one tease, which is that at some point before this big heist, someone, uh, a crook bleeding out, comes to Nick's door and then says, like, I'm with Carl sent me. I'm with one of the guys. I need help. And Nick's like, I don't know you. And he's like, well, but you got to treat me. I'm dying here. And he's like, what's your number? And the guy just guesses like 2 digits. And he's like, no, sorry, you're not. I don't know what this is. Go away. And then that guy dies down the road, which gets the police involved. And this is where Pulaski kind of meets Nick for the first time. And this is where we learn that, yeah, Nick, started at normal medical school, then went to become a vet. He's just answering normal questions, and there's a little bit of tension here, and then it doesn't come back again until it's revealed that Pulaski was Carl's partner, and where everybody else, except for maybe one of the guys, who, what was it, like Noah something, or I can't remember. Again, a lot of characters in this thing, guys. Van Gogh, I think maybe. It was Van Gogh or something. Everybody else was kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe we're going to abandon the heist and just take what we got and go our separate ways. But Pulaski's like, nope, we're not abandoning the gig. We've got everything in place. We're going to do it. And if Nick doesn't cooperate, I'm just going to use my connections at the police department to basically ensure that his son doesn't pass his next drug test and stays in and gets transferred to a correctional facility for the next 7 to 10 years of his life. And I'm like, okay, good stakes. Pretty good. He's got a means to do that. Was a little missing on the motivation as to why he actually needs Nick there. And we find out it pertains to him just being, operating an ambulance, driving the ambulance, and being the doctor to kind of create this veneer for their entry and exit.
Yeah, having like, I guess, a credible getaway or whatever, when which is essentially all he does in the end anyway.
Yeah, just the getaway driver. I mean, I think the plan is fun. It would be great to kind of see. There's some nice moments of tension and some nice moments of levity. Not like snarky, quippy jokes, but just like, oh, thank God, or whatever. But it just kind of felt a little too late for me in this story, because this comes like right at the tail end of the second act, right before we lead into the climax. And one of the things that kind of also threw me off a little bit was how much of Carl's crew was still willing to do this just for the money, when it felt more like it was established that there was a relationship between them and Carl that was kind of deep and trustworthy, where I wasn't 100% sure I believed them just throwing in their chips with Pulaski for this last cabal. Um,
Yeah, because Carl was sort of almost trying to like watch out for them, and you're right. It was sort of implied that this is kind of going to be their last job for all of them, right? I think that's
yeah,
what it was leading up to.
yeah.
Yeah, so for them to just turn around right after he dies and go, "No, we're doing this," and they sort of just get reduced to thugs basically at the end.
Essentially, yeah, just thugs in it for the money, nothing more. Um, it just didn't feel authentic enough for that, and I think that's part of where like it doesn't necessarily cause the script to fall apart, but it does start to get it into the contrived area of storytelling.
I
And so
think if they would have tied it maybe back into, because you mentioned earlier that part that I remember reading in the script now about how Carl had passed up jobs in order to get this
mhm.
connection. Because, he was talking, he had a connection, he said, this is it, like, this is the big one. And then they're all done. Maybe somehow that playing into it, like they've sacrificed too much to give up on this at the end, or, again, instead of just turning around and throwing their chips in with Pulaski, maybe there being some reason like they had given up too much. Carl had given up a few jobs. They were, short on cash or whatever, so they have to do this for the sake of, whatever, their personal lives or something. I think it would have given it maybe a little bit more motivation for them to be there.
I think so because one of the things with these types of heist movies, especially like the Italian Job, Ocean's 11 and whatnot, is that they are they're spending a lot of money to pull off this job. They're actually spending enough money where they probably could have been easier for them just to rig the race with the money that they had than it would be to
Right.
do what they ended up doing because hey, you've got a doctor who's a horse doctor who actually knows stuff about horses. Maybe he could do something where he provides a mild sedative to all the other horses except for one, but allows them to still pass, which gives that horse an edge to win. And they place all their money that they would have invested in this to bet that horse and then take the purse legitimately and not have to worry about it, or vice versa. Give it a stimulant so it that doesn't last long, that can evade tests or be written off as something kind of freakish but not necessarily illegal. That would have been there because I mean I'm just thinking about Ocean's 11 where the whole gimmick is that they build a fake version of the entire safe, and it's like, well, that's a few $1,000,000 because they go full authentic, like even with the marble tile and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, you're blowing millions of dollars just to get tens of millions of dollars. I understand it's more, but you could probably just spend that money smarter somewhere and get it down. That's why I always
Yeah.
like the heist movies where it's like they have nothing other than their wits and a couple of like gimmicks, and they go in to steal. It's like, okay, well, there you go. They're desperate. They have nothing. Odds are heavily against them. But now you start organizing this elaborate plan. There's another movie I think was on Ben Affleck did where it's a heist in like the jungle, and they build a replica house to practice. And it's like, if you can afford to build a house, what the heck do you need money for? Like the
Yeah,
houses are
you guys
expensive,
got
man.
enough money lying around if you're gonna do that.
Yeah. And so I was kind of thinking there's a little bit of this because again, it's got those Ocean 11 marks. We have the ambulance that they built that's got like armored truck, so it's bulletproof. Obviously, there's going to be costumes. There's advanced weaponry. There's a little bit of disposable income to bribe people and whatnot. It just seems like they're doing pretty well without the need of this heist. Where's the motivation to really need the more out of that? Like I don't. That's the other part too. I was really missing Pulaski's motivation. Why is he the guy and why is he doing this?
Yeah, I think it was like a throw. I think they gave him like a throwaway line, didn't they? Like a little bit into the movie when he's sort of blackmailing Nick, and he's like, "I got people I'm trying to take care of too," or something like that. Um,
Right.
I don't know if it's implied that it was his parents because he went to,
He
uh,
went to a nursing home and he saw, I
after,
guess, his brother, and I think
yeah,
it's
right.
supposed to be his mom.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right after his. I think the script said it was he kisses his mother or something like that, and I think it was after his partner died. So I don't know if it's implied that he's trying to get money to take care of them, but I didn't quite catch that part. Were they in a home? I guess they were maybe in a home or like a retirement home or something
It
like
seemed
that.
like, yeah, continuing care center of some sort, but it didn't seem like it was
Right.
decrepit or run down or horrible or anything of that.
They didn't seem to be doing bad. So yeah, I think they sort of gave him that throwaway line to say, "I got others I'm taking care of too." But harkening back to the scene where he actually goes and visits them, they seem to be doing fine. There was no indication that they were, about to get kicked out or he didn't have enough money or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
So his motivation was a little
there's nothing at stake
thin.
for Pulaski from a villainous point of view. And this goes back into the arguments like, listen, a grid villain is not necessarily sympathetic, but you understand why they're doing something. And the low hanging
Right.
fruit is to make them sympathetic, but the more impressive thing is give them circumstances where one interpretation could make them sympathetic, but they don't do anything to make themselves sympathetic. They're just looking at the circumstances, the conflict that they have, and they're like, "Well, screw you, system. I'm going to do this thing anyways." That's how you do a good villain as well. Like, someone's going to foreclose, the bank's going to foreclose on your house. Well, like, screw you, I'm just going to steal from the bank and pay them back with their own money. Like, yeah,
Right.
it's not sympathetic, but it's like, it's also, that's still a bad thing to do. I mean, yeah, you're getting one over on the bank guy who's foreclosing on your home, but maybe he's doing it under the ethical circumstances. And now you're going to break the law to, you know, tip the scales in your favor because you feel like you've been wronged, even though it's, your problem that you got yourself into for whatever reason. So we were
Yeah,
missing
Pulaski
that.
was Yeah, I felt like Pulaski was thin towards the end. Like his motivation and a bunch of stuff, his character started becoming real. Hey, we just need this guy here to do stuff because we needed to reveal. I guess we needed to reveal who the guy behind, like who Carl's connection was behind this whole thing. You find out that this is the last job essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then what was I going to say? I was going to say something else too. Um, oh, the speaking of him being kind of thin too, it was the between the first half of the script and the second half of the script, you're right, because you had alluded to, um, I think it was something that you mentioned before, how they seem to have had more of, they almost seem like a family, like a tight
Yeah.
knit sort of group where Carl was watching out for them and they were sort of in with Carl and they knew about Nick, but Carl was also protecting him. So you kind of get this messy family dynamic almost. And then the second half of the script, once it kicked into this last heist and Pulaski was revealed, almost devolved into like I said, they almost sort of became thugs. Pulaski didn't really have much of a motivation to be there, or at least what we got wasn't. I didn't feel like was enough anyway. Um, and then for Nick to be involved, I mean, that was the only part because he sort of had the blackmail over him, and then his son, the thing with his son, like his son was involved, and he wanted him to get out, so he kind of felt like he had no other recourse but to do this. But then the rest of it sort of started falling apart a little bit. The second half.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way too. So I guess, yeah, I think, I mean, aside from the fact that I guess almost a quarter of the script is essentially the final act and a spoiler. Let's get into the final thoughts and our ratings on this. So Raul, how would you rate the script? Would you give it a green light or a pass?
I think I would give it a green light, despite the fact that it's got some problems. Towards the end, especially, I feel like mainly just with Pulaski and the third act there, that is a little bit too long. I feel like some stuff could have been cut out. We could have done away with some of the racetrack stuff. But yeah, well, other than that, I felt like at least the beginning, it had a great start. It had a great middle. The stakes were there. His father-in-law dies, and it sort of pulls him back into this whole world. So I thought that was all really well done. It was fairly well paced, especially in the beginning, and the dialogue was great. Characters felt pretty authentic. I think it's just the last little bit maybe that needs some work, but other than that, I think it's interesting enough to warrant a green light to me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this script got 47 votes and was number 2 on the blacklist, right behind Bad Boy. I think it definitely deserves that for the first half, right? I mean, even with the twist of Pulaski being the partner, I thought that was really intriguing. I think where it
Mhm.
fails is really on the tail end, um, but not so much in the sense compared to other scripts that we've reviewed, where it had a good strong opening and then it just kind of really fell apart at the end. This one here, it doesn't really fall apart. It just it just gets a little bit overbuilt because it's
Yeah.
not overwritten, but there's a lot of pieces and players well organized throughout the entirety of the tail end that makes a really good and intriguing set piece, and it has a couple of gimmicks that they make work really well with it. So I mean, it's right up to the edge of it's like neck and neck for me. It's like, yeah, I'd probably give it a green light, but it's very very close because again, that if the last act wasn't written so well, but at the same time being a little bit on the convoluted side and a little bit like with way too many pieces going on, it might have made me want to pass it because it's like, okay, you got some third act problems that are really difficult to reconcile, but it wasn't quite there yet. It's like it just inched by for me in that
It
regard.
it felt like the pieces were all there. It felt like the pieces were all there, and it definitely got something going for it. It started to fall apart a little bit, but you're right. It's sort of just to the edge. It didn't quite completely go over the cliff for me, which is why I think it was. I'd still give it a green light. But yeah, the second half to like what third maybe of the script probably needs some a little bit of reworking anyway, and definitely some shortening with that last heist too.
Yeah, I think he could have cut. I think definitely he could have cut 15 pages out of that because there's other
Yeah.
characters are introduced during that whole operation, and it kind of stretches things out unnecessarily. But it doesn't make it boring, and I think that's kind of the number one aspect too. Is he at no point does Justin Piasecki write a boring scene or a boring script, and that's kind of rule number one, which is don't be boring. So
Yeah, and even at the end, I mean, we without spoiling anything, but we sort of talked about it. You get a little bit more into the workings of the track and sort of their inner workings,
mhm.
and that probably wasn't necessary. And you're right, that could have cut definitely some time and also kept the pacing up a little bit better too.
Yeah, I mean, going just recounting our conversation so far, the only really flaw we have two minor flaws that don't kill the story, but just could definitely be filled in easily, and that is Nick's a better reason for Nick's involvement in this relationship. Besides that, it's his father-in-law, and a little bit more of a motivation for Pulaski and why he's doing this. Like what's at his stake? Because again, the best type of drama comes when your antagonist and your protagonist, their stakes collide with each other. So now you're weighing the scales. Well, who's going to win? And if antagonist wins, how does that change the world? And if protagonist wins, how does that change the world? Because that refines your states, that gives you drive into what's going on with it. And I think, yeah, that's an easy fix compared to some of the other ones that we've reviewed so far.
Yeah, and almost like giving him the motivation of why he's doing this and why he wants to. Um, I guess to even turn against his coworkers and stuff, right? Because he saw his partner die, and
Mm-hmm.
then you find out that he's sort of the big bad behind all of this. Um, and then sort of I guess finding out what his motivation is and then working backwards and sort of peppering it through some of the scenes because even the ones that we did have with his partner and them sort of doing the criminal investigation because of the first heist that we get in the script um, unless I missed it, I don't think there was really anything there building his motivation or to say that he was like bitter against something, so he
Mm-hmm.
was going to turn, he did this on the side. I don't think there was anything there unless I missed it. Did you? You didn't see anything, did you?
No, nothing picked up, and I've got a bunch of notes. I mean, one thing that I have noticed, and I'm going to say this to all writers out there, um, anyone reading your script can tell when you're rushing, and the easiest way is spelling mistakes, and there are not many in this, but there was a double usage around page 75, and then they introduced a new character named Wallace, and then they spell him at one point Wallace. So it's like we you can there's always those little tells that an astute reader and producer and whatnot can tell, oh, this guy is getting excited with the script, which is good, but it's coming at the expense of his fingers are not in sync with his mind, and he's hitting the wrong keys, and he's just trying to get it out quickly, as opposed to someone who has probably meticulously planned out all the beats and stages and what he's going in there. So be mindful of that, guys, because it's kind of weird, but one thing that does impress people, even if your story is kind of weak, is if there's not a single spelling or grammar error in it at all, because then they know that you care, and that conveys a lot more, because if you care about the story and you care about what you're working on, the idea is that, oh, if you get assigned something from as a result of this script, ideally you're going to put the same level of effort of care into it as you did your own, and that's what they want. They want to make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted, and that you don't have a script supervisor, a producer, or a budget, or a budgeting accountant team going through it and be like, well, okay, so wait, is this a veterinarian or a veteran? Like, what's the what do you have to plan? We have to get a veterans clinic. No, it's supposed to be a veterinarian clinic. Well, you didn't spell that there, so we got to get that fixed. So you got to be
Yeah,
mindful
we
of
showed
that.
up with we showed up with some veterans instead. Whoopsies.
Yeah, it's like we got a whole lot of stuff from the Pentagon, posters, fake paperwork for all vets care and all that stuff. Oh, it's supposed to be an animal hospital. Son of a gun. Well,
I
that's a
asked for
couple million
pictures of
dollars pissed away.
horses.
Yeah. So be mindful of that, guys. I don't think there's really much more we can bring up after that, Raul. Again, this is a solid script.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that really helps with the writing process too is and talking about it just in terms from a character standpoint, I almost feel like the kind of outlining both motivation and what the arc is supposed to be for all these characters maybe would have helped a little bit. And I'm not sure if he did it in this case, but with Pulaski, for example, I almost feel like knowing what the end goal is or knowing why he's doing all of this and then sort of working it back to how does he get to that point
Mm-hmm.
would help, because I think then you could start to pepper in through some of the scenes that we got with his coworkers, or maybe he has to go in to see his boss. Maybe he's on his last legs with, or, last little bit with his boss before he gets fired or something. At least would give him some motivation, something to say, we set this up ahead of time. And
Yes.
no, I feel maybe was lacking. I feel like maybe the sort of end goal where we get with the character, why he's there, and then working backwards from that was sort of missing as well, which may be why some of the character motivations and backstory sort of fell a little flat towards the end as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Pulaski twist was more like an in the moment stream of conscious idea that happened and he just kind of made it work, as
Right,
opposed
right. And it
to,
was good.
I
I mean,
mean,
it was
yeah,
I liked
strong.
it. Yeah.
I will say this. I'm glad I didn't see it coming, but I would have appreciated a bit more, not necessarily of a setup that it's going to be him, but just a setup that Pulaski is not doing well either. Like, just
Right.
like, if he wants to steal a lot of money, give me something more than the fact that, yeah, he sees his daughter one weekend every month, and that's only in the line of dialogue. I'd much rather him be, it might be a little bit cliche, but you have him this dedicated cop that solves every case, but it comes at the expense of his personal life, where you go to his apartment, it's just like a one bedroom bachelor with, like, a bathroom next to a kitchen, but only a partition and not an actual set of walls. And that's because he spends all of his time at, the police department. But then you realize, like, yeah, he loves his job, but he also hates living in the squabble because it doesn't pay well, or whatever expenses he does have, he doesn't get to relish in it. So you end up getting that payoff where, oh, okay, I understand why he wants the money. He doesn't want to live in that. He doesn't want to be a cop anymore. He doesn't want to be losing all of his money to alimony and child support. He wants the money to get full custody of his kid or something, something that you could understand, and he's willing to do anything for it, to the point where it's like, I don't think this guy should have full custody of his kid if he's willing to kill and murder people for a lot of money. you know?
Right, and it would have given him a nice sort of a counterpoint to Nick, right? Because Nick wants out too, and
Yeah.
maybe Pulaski could have wanted out. Maybe he wanted out, and you're right. He could have been living like in a rundown place. Maybe his, he keeps getting notices or something where his mother and brother or whatever are about to be evicted from the home that they're in or something like that. So it gives him a little bit of a something to
Right.
say, yeah, he was a good cop and stuff, but now he's taking this turn because he needs something too, and then he wants out. So I think it would have set up his character and his motivation a little bit better, and given him sort of a counterpoint to Nick, where Nick was headed in this direction and he's trying to get out clean, and then this guy's also trying to get out, but he's willing to do it at any cost.
Right. No, I'm fully on board with that. I think that would have been that would have made it an easier green light for
Yeah.
me in that case, as opposed to making it so hard. Um, all right, that's all I've got on my end for this. Again, guys, I encourage you if you can go find and read this script. There's a lot you can learn from it. It's quite enjoyable. It should be a simple Google search, but if you are having trouble and you want to read it, you can reach out to me on the Twitter X's at ScriptDoctorPhD. I can hook you up with that. Only stipulation is please don't try and virally spread it around. This is someone's work that they're using as their calling card and ideally trying to sell. Maybe it will be produced in a few years. If you join the Patreon, you get to see what scripts we are reviewing every on the Monday prior to the following Saturday show. You can also make some comments there, which will be read live here on the show and addressed. And yeah, with that, Raul, where can our lovely audience find you?
I got my YouTube channel, Raul at Raul NU. I think links and everything will be in the chat or down
Yep.
below or whatever. So go click that and go there for all sorts of filmmaking stuff and color grading. And I'm starting back up. I took a little bit of a break, but got a video out and got another one coming this week. So, make sure you're subscribed if you enjoy all sorts of stuff filmmaking.
Yeah, I've got your channel link there in the chat. I want to thank you again for joining us for another awesome episode and discussion on Scripts on Saturdays, Raul. We're going to have you back more in the future when it works out for your schedule. I want to thank everyone out there listening, either in the live show or on the replay. Really appreciate it. We are pretty much at the halfway point. Next week is going to be a halfway point, episode 26. And I'm really proud of what we've been doing. I'm proud of all the opinions we've been getting from you guys out there in the chat and in the comment section, along with all the guest hosts that have been coming by. More will be returning in the near future, so stick around for that. And have a wonderful rest of the weekend, everybody. And never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.